Ann Roripaugh is joining us tonight, standing in for Susan Power, who was not able to be there, so I just asked you all to send Susan good thoughts. Ann Roripaugh is the author of 4 volumes of poetry, the most recent of which, Dandelions, was released by Milkweed Editions in September 2014. Her second volume, Year of the Snake, was named winner of the Association of Asian American Studies Book Award in Poetry Prose for 2004, and her first book, Beyond Heart Mountain, was a 1998 winner of the National Poetry Series. The recipient of a 2003 Archibald Bush Foundation Individual Artist Fellowship, she was also named the 2004 winner of the Prairie Schooner Struce Award, the 2001 winner of the Frederick Manfred Award for Best Creative Writing, awarded by the Western Literature Association, and the 1995 winner of the Randall Jarrell International Poetry Prize. Her short stories have been shortlisted as stories of note in the Pushcart Prize anthologies, and 2 of her essays have been shortlisted as essays of note for the Best American Essays anthology. Her poetry and short stories have appeared in numerous journals and anthologies. Roripaugh is currently a professor of English at the University of South Dakota, where she serves as the Director of Creative Writing and Editor-in-Chief of South Dakota Review. This year, Roripaugh was named the South Dakota State Poet Laureate, taking over from David Allen Evans, who will be reading tomorrow night with Philip Dacey. We welcome Ann Roripaugh.
It is really an honor to be here tonight. Emergency pinch hitting for Susan Power to follow Gordon's beautiful reading. So thank you so much for this invitation. It's lovely to be here. I'm going to read some poems from my most recently released book, Dandelions, and then I'm going to switch gears and read some newer work. The first poem explains the title of this book. Dandelions is a collection of prose poems and lyric flash essays, and the lyric flash essays circulate around what I think of as word betrayals, words that were transmitted to me through the scrim of my Japanese mother's accent that were sort of hybrid or in-between words, not quite English, not quite Japanese, and they came to take on their own emotional and symbolic weight, but also, as in things that are in that liminal in-between space, it was sometimes a transgressive and dangerous space as well. So these lyric flash essays then form the backbone of the book, which is really about language, and language in particular is a kind of yearning. So this first poem explains the title of the book. It's the first of these word betrayals, Dandelions. It's called The Planet of Dandar, and it's a lyric flash essay. Prism through the scrim of my mother's Japanese accent, I think dandelions are dandarians. Dandelions, futuristic, alien, like something named after late-night B-movie space creatures from an undiscovered planet. Maybe this is why the disturbingly lurid fronds seem too yellow to me. They seethe, I believe, with a feverishly incandescent radioactivity. I'm convinced this explains the obsessive, anxiety-laced fervor with which my parents uproot them from our lawn, as if under threat of colonization. Years later, reading Ray Bradbury's Dandelion Wine, I'm shocked at the thought of imbibing dandelions as alcoholic libation. I always secretly assumed dandelions were poisonous. I'm convinced it must be a hoax. I begin to distrust the boundaries between Bradbury's literary fiction and his science fiction. Because I'm the only one in my kindergarten class who can read and write, there's shock and fallout when my confusion over dandelions and dandelions is discovered. I receive special coaching, slowly and loudly, as if I have suddenly become impaired. You say dandy, then say lion. At home, because it seems important, I pass the secret knowledge on to my mother. You have to say dandy, I tell her, then say lion. Her slap flares a stung handprint on my cheek like alien handprints in the TV show Roswell. I'm the mother, she says, you the daughter. As if that explains everything, as if in another year or so I won't make phone calls on her behalf, pretending to be my own mother so she won't have to struggle to make herself understood to hairdressers, pharmacists, the PTA. Can they really not understand her? Or do they simply willfully refuse to comprehend? I am 5. I understand I've hurt my mother's feelings without meaning to. I understand dandelions are toxically radioactive, just not in the ways I'd originally thought. And so when I tell you I'm an alien, a Dandelion, hailing from the planet Dandar, I am, of course, mostly joking, but not entirely. When I tell you I'm radioactive, it's mostly a posture, but not entirely. On Dandar, we are partial to the theme song from Hawaii 5-0. We like the color yellow. All the best dresses chosen by mothers for daughters come in the color yellow. We eat osembe and sometimes mochi after school with hot green tea, speak our very own pidgin English at the kitchen table when my father's at the office. My father doesn't approve, maybe because our pidgin's sometimes laced with the best new swear words I've learned at school. We never, ever answer the phone without proper deployment of the secret code. Here's my universal translation device. Although when fog threads the streets like a rough, shaggy yarn, too unruly to slip through the eye of a sewing needle, the reception becomes white static and everything garbles to babble. Half-life. Decay. This is my ray gun. Do you know the secret code? This is kind of a nice autumnal poem. It takes place alongside the Vermilion River where I like to walk, and there's a point after that first hard frost or where there's that cold rain and the leaves that have been falling, they kind of leave these little moldy prints. So this is called Imprint. Yesterday's air, bristling Japanese beetles, all metallic pinch and ping. Grasshoppers jiffy-popping under a blue aluminum dome. A stray dog day cicada stranded on its back on the path, rattling its dry gourd of a body with a mechanical wind-up toy stutter and twitch. All rescinded after a single morning's chilled rain. Leaf prints mold-scored onto asphalt. An immolation of orange and yellow burning stilled to silhouetted ash and char. The imprint of your body fading too quickly from my bed. Was it an erasure, or was it a swallowing? Or the shimmered turning of a purse inside out to reveal the silky lining? Leaves glisten, the dock is drizzle slick. Sky an uncertain purling of abalone. And yes, I have been turned utterly inside out. So what other choice is there, if not to simply give oneself up to the rain, to glisten, shine, and pearl and certainly into this very absence, this same ache, this lambent and indefinite quiet? Okay, this is another lyric flash essay, another word betrayal. This is called Senshi Mental. As a child, I weld the words centimeter and sentimental together because my mother pronounces centimeter as Senshi Mental. Senshi Mental, which sounds much like sentimental to me. When measuring her knitting, she counts out loud under her breath. 1 sentimental, 2 sentimental, 3 sentimental. I don't know exactly what sentimental means, but it seems to summon forth some vintage thrift shop version of love, steeped in nostalgia's mothballs, crimped with a wry twist of camp. It makes me think of the red construction paper and lace doily valentines we make in elementary school, slightly sour skins of Elmer's glue peeling off our fingerprints, or those chalky candy hearts embossed in courier font with words like yowza and hubba hubba. It reminds me of the stuffed white cat with a red ribbon around its neck my mother stores inside a wooden crate in her closet, underneath her hand-painted silk kimonos, along with my father's gold football from high school that hangs on a chain, and the oddly drawn explanatory pictures of buffalo on onion-skinned blue airmail paper sent to her in Japan from my American grandparents' ranch in Wyoming the year they spent apart before eloping. 1 sentimental, 2 sentimental, 3 sentimental. My mother's knitting needles are gleaming and sharp. Her tongue is even sharper. I confuse love with knitting and think love is quietly meted out like the sweaters my mother knits for me, centimeter by centimeter. Soft rasp of yarn tugged from the unraveling skein of red heart worsted purchased on sale at Woolworths. Rapid patient ticking of the knitting needle's shiny syncopated clicking. Red loops bleeding out from the needles and dripping into a complex network of knit and purl that ultimately takes the shape of something one can concretely name: red sweater. Red sweaters studded with bright silver buttons to push through the stiff emptiness of the buttonholes. My mother knits us all matching red sweaters, mother, father, daughter. My mother and father wearing sweaters with brown buttons made from crisscrossed leather. It makes her happy when we go together in our matching sweaters to Albertsons, Vaughn's Pharmacy, or Montgomery Ward's. In this way, she knits us all together, I think, visually insisting we belong to one another. Is it because none of us are exactly the same race, I sometimes wonder. 1 sentimental, 2 sentimental, 3 sentimental. I learned how to knit early on, but I do it very rarely. I have a doll with curly, honey-colored hair. She looks like Rita Hayworth. I knit her a lumpy red sweater from leftover yarn. Senshi Mental makes me think of the methodical, up-looped inching of inchworms. It makes me think of how I am shy and skittish, how I approach slowly and warily, even though my instincts for self-preservation predictably end up undermined by my curiosity. But only if someone stays very still, avoids startling gestures. Although, to be honest, sometimes it's the startling gestures that make me the most curious. Typically, I inch forward, sentimental by sentimental, yet flee very quickly. Because it is the mental on the end of sentimental, I think, that scares me a little. 1 sentimental, 2 sentimental. One night, driving home on I-29 from the Omaha airport, I find 2 life-size brontosaurs rendered in gold twinkle lights, slender necks intertwined on the side of the Nebraska highway, a red heart emblazoned above their heads. I knit them into a poem. I call them corny and improbable. I accuse them of being oblivious to the fact of their own extinction. Is it obvious that I am quite taken with them nonetheless? It is, perhaps, no accident that this is a poem in which the speaker is unsure about whether or not she's running away from something or running toward it. 1 sentimental, 2 sentimental, 3 sentimental. I learned how to knit early on, but I do it very rarely. Understand about needles, Beware the sudden flash and parry, the silvered piercing which leaves a hole that's sometimes a wound, sometimes an aperture through which we fill ourselves with light. Understand that even the best of us can be skewered, tender pieces of meat that we are, as matter-of-factly as shish kebab. This next poem is inspired by a song by Chibomato. They're a Japanese duo. They have this really fantastic song called Do You Know Your Chicken? I think one should know one's chicken, but this poem isn't about chicken. This is about their artichoke song, which I particularly love. It's a great song, but I also love artichokes. Artichokes are my totem produce because they're kind of prickly on the outside and there's a soft, creamy, squishy heart in the middle. I think everyone should have a totem produce, but you can't have the artichoke because it's my totem produce. The other great thing about artichokes is that their petals they adhere to the pattern of the golden mean, so they follow the Fibonacci sequence, as do many things in nature, which I think is amazing. So this poem is called Fibonacci, and I'm almost there. I sold out all of my books at my last appearance. Like I even gave away my reading books, so I'm doing this on Kindle, so that's why I'm flipping. But hang on just a sec. I'm getting close, sorry. Okay, Fibonacci. A bouquet of prickles and stings. You weigh each thistled scale one by one, drizzle with euphemisms. Creamy, nutty, fleshy, green. What will happen when I've gifted all my nettles away? What's left? Steamed flour to scoop clean out, edible, pressure-cooked heart. You're plucky and buttery, ruthless in your mathematics of extractions and subtractions, a Fibonacci series of unpedaling. Can you squeeze a lemon on me? Seismic shifts, things unhinge. Relax with ice and slit the resistant muscle or steam open the shell. Do not pry and do not suck. The ice, the knife, the glove. Earthworms rise to the surface, throb and bake in fierce light. Mole-lats head drum their portents. Catfish thrash in a tumult of silt. Oh, harmonic tremor. Oh, earthquake. Oh, sweet giant. Oh, beautiful tsunami. I'm going to read some pieces from a new project called Tsunami versus the Fukushima 50. And I wanted to honor and commemorate and remember the 2011 Japanese Tohoku earthquake and tsunami and the subsequent Fukushima disaster. I didn't want to make a spectacle of people suffering those, so I wanted to figure out a way to come at it from a slant. So this is a collection then that borrows on the tropes from comics, and particularly superheroes who have been created through radiation, like the X-Men, or it draws on the tropes of Godzilla, the rise of monsters on Monster Island, which was really kind of an environmental response to the dropping of the atomic bombs at the end of World War II. So I'm playing a lot with comic books in this sense. So I created a supervillainous Tsunami, who's a force of nature and has many different faces and incarnations. And much like Magneto from the X-Men, who is a flawed and dangerous individual, but one who sometimes has very noble intentions, Magneto was created through the trauma of the Holocaust and seeing his parents killed. So Tsunami is literally created by the trauma of the fault line in the ocean floor. And like Magneto, she's sometimes compassionate and very dangerous and sometimes scary and psychopathic. But then also then I have the fictional Fukushima 50, who are survivors of the tsunami, some of them speaking from beyond the grave. And they, like many superheroes like the X-Men, who are frequently created through radioactive accidents, are kind of loosely woven into various comic book superheroes. So the first poem I'd like to read is called Animal Portents Foretell the Rise of Tsunami, because if a supervillainess is coming, there should be animal portents to herald her arrival. And these are actually all kinds of things that happen with animals when they predict natural disasters such as earthquake or tsunami. Animal portents foretell the rise of tsunami. When elephants kneel, pressing their trunks down to the ground like seismic antenna. When mole rats head drum adumbrations, listen for predictions, aug your jawbones snugged to tunnel walls. When cats spill from windows, slip through open doors, some welder's torch sizzle fizzing the tips of their whiskers. When insect swarms clot the shore in a frantic, tangled macrame, and hippopotamuses bellow a chorus of mournful cellos. When snakes awaken from hibernation, curlicuing up from their dens like bolts come unscrewed, their frozen bodies a semiology of hieroglyphs in the snow. Takadai ni tatsu, Takadai ni tatsu, Takadai ni tatsu, hayaku nigeru. When double helixes spun by skeins of flying sparrows unravel. When centipedes appear in rippling synchronicities. When colonies of toads erupt like burst popcorn from ponds' silver foil. When fish come unschooled. When bees abandon their queens, flee their honey. When silky clusters of bats lift in smoky volcanic furies as if rising from a city ravished in flame. This is a poem that draws on the character of Mothra from Godzilla. And this is a dramatic monologue of a fictional survivor of Fukushima. She is a young woman who's pregnant with twins. And Mothra is, if you don't know, is a giant moth. And in the traditional Godzilla stories, she is accompanied by a pair pair of tiny singing Japanese twins known as shobijin. And when Mothra is called, the twins sing a special song for her. So this is called Mothra Flies Again. I knew it was a bad omen when silk moth cocoons hung unhatched like stillborn husks from the mulberry trees. Imagos furled tight as parasols, crumbling to ash and dust inside. But still, I felt so lucky to have survived the tsunami. I felt so lucky to be alive after 3 reactor meltdowns. Daijobu, said Mayor Norio Kano. Daijobu, echoed the village officials. Everything was fine, fine, fine. For weeks, everything was daijobu, while our village was irradiated. The soil, the water, the produce, the dust particles, the rain. 3 months later, Itate was a ghost town crumbling to dust, infested with mold and vermin, and we had become part of the nuclear diaspora. Now we stay in prefab shelters assigned to us in Date City, waiting for cleanup workers to scrape off Itate's farmland topsoil, sealing it into bags no one wants to handle, like too hot sweet potatoes. And when the high-pressure washers that were promised never arrived, the workers began scrubbing off contaminants using only paper towels. How can we ever go back there? At night, I lie awake and unpack my worries like wooden kokeshi dolls, nested one inside the other. What if, what if, what if? My heart clangs inside my chest, then waits with held breath for the twin girls nested inside me to shift or twist or kick in reply within their amniotic fluid. I try not to think of the cocoons shriveling on the vine, the weeks I unknowingly exposed my twins, small as a pair of Bing cherries, to radioactive contamination while believing everything was daijobu. Instead, I get up and watch late-night kaiju movies on television, the ones my father used to love. All of the monsters rising one by one on Monster Island. Gojira, Reidon, Jigan, Ebira. Last week, I saw a movie about Hedora, the smog monster, who fell to Earth from outer space in a cloud of toxic spores. While tonight I doze on the sofa as Mothra is summoned by her twin fairy priestesses who sing for her when they're in danger. How fiercely she defends them with her electric beam antenna, her deadly lightning bolts, the scatter of poisonous yellow shed from the scales on her wings. When I wake, the light is harsh, my neck a sore bent stem, and the red ambulance melody of my shobijin, my small beauties, sirens a distress call inside me. Mothra, ya Mothra. I'll finish with one final dramatic monologue in the voice of a survivor. This is called Hulk Smash. Because it was afternoon and I was at the carnation farm when the earthquake struck. Because by the time I arrived back home to help my family, traffic jams had clogged shut the main arterial roads leading inland from Fibonacci. Because when the tsunami breached the seawall and concrete disintegrated like strewn chunks of soggy plywood, we had to leave our car and flee for higher ground. Because the elevated hill marked as the evacuation point for an elementary school seemed like it should be safe, until the tsunami rose like a thundering wall of water and blotted out the sky. Because there wasn't time for us to climb all the way up the hill, so I held my wife and daughter in my arms, and we clung together tightly, wrapped around a tree. Because the icy water uprooted the tree so easily, like plucking up a blade of grass, and tore my wife, Mayumi, away from me. Because I could see Natsu was crying for her mother, though I couldn't hear her above the roar of the water, and I was scared I'd hurt her from holding on so tight. Because when I regained consciousness again, with a concussion and a broken leg after having blacked out, my arms were empty. Because she was only 3. Because I was taken against my will to a hospital in Itate, where I was promised that rescue workers would search the coast for any survivors and bring them to safety. Because the meltdowns and hydrogen explosions at Fukushima Daiichi began the next day, and everyone within a 20-kilometer radius was evacuated so that no one was able to look for my wife or my daughter. Because the nuclear accident at Fukushima Daiichi was, as it turns out, preventable. Because what if my wife and daughter were injured but still alive? And what if someone had only searched for them during those early days after the tsunami? Because it was over a month before I was allowed back into the exclusion zone, where I found Mayumi's body in a nearby rice field. Because my wife's remains were so terribly decomposed after having been left out to weather the elements, insects, birds, and vermin, she was no longer recognizable, and the Buddhist burial rites could not be followed before her body was burned. Because over 4 years have passed with my life still in limbo, unable to return to what's left of my home, to my work breeding carnations, unable to lay Mayumi's ashes to rest on ancestral grounds. Because my daughter Natsu is still missing, even though I search for her every month in the 5-hour increments allowed by radiation guidelines. Because I am by nature a quiet and scientific man, a botanist by trade, but I work so ferociously at clearing debris and digging along the shoreline to search for my daughter's remains, tearing off my hazmat gear when it gets in the way or when it becomes too hot, that volunteer search teams have nicknamed me the Hulk. Because so what? I no longer care about being exposed to radiation, and maybe it'll make me stronger anyway, like the weird profusion of 2 bright and hardy flowers blooming in the irradiated wake of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Maybe even strong enough to hold on to what matters. Because plans are underway to build a containment facility in Futaba City for the bags upon bags of contaminated topsoil and radioactive debris gathered by the cleanup workers that no one knows what to do with. Because if this happens, Futaba will become just a permanent trash site for nuclear waste, a toxic garbage dump where my daughter's remains will be abandoned forever. Because how can I let this be? Because my arms are empty. Because she was only 3. Because now, every month when I spend my 5 hours searching the no-go zone, and I see one of the many rusted TEPCO signs reading, "Nuclear power, bright future of energy," I feel such a huge surge of adrenaline and rage that I have to tear it down. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leanne, very much. And thank you, Gordon, as well. Leanne, as she said, has sold out of her books. And since we just invited her to come 24 hours ago, we weren't able to order any. But she does have postcards of Dandelions, and she will be out there. And I'm hoping that the bookstore has Gordon's books out there. If not, they are in the bookstore. And I hope that all of you will be able to join us tomorrow and Saturday. And thank you so much again.